Phonics, which is one's ability to understand that there is a sound-letter correspondence in spoken language, is one subcategory in language learning that falls under a more broader term. This broader term, known as phonological awareness, includes phonemic awareness in phonics and is defined as anything having to do with the sound of language. Let us first explore phonemic awareness. In phonemic awareness, focus is placed on the smallest unit of sounds in words called phonemes, and one's ability to manipulate these phonemes in oral language. One example is d, a, g, as in dog, or d, a, k, as in duck. Children must be able to differentiate between sound and delineate sound substitution. Children may be asked, where did you hear the d sound in duck? Was it at the beginning, middle, or at the end of the word? And if I take out the d and add the t sound, what new word have I spoken? This slight contrast in pronunciation is the difference between an animal that says quack and a small fold in a garment. Without phonemic awareness, children will not benefit from phonics instruction. Phonics is an extremely important component of literacy because English is fundamentally an alphabetic code. Spoken language is rendered into a written word using letters to represent sounds in words. Not all languages have an alphabetic principle. For example, in the Chinese language, words are encoded at the syllable level using a pictographic base, and this is one example. Remember the duck? Only in phonics instruction is differences in spelling an issue. So duck spelled D-U-C-K. Children learning phonics values are taught a sequence of skills that constitute a word recognition view of reading. This sequence is 1. Words are made up of individual sounds. 2. The names of letters. 3. The sounds associated with each letter. And 4. The correspondence between sounds and letters. Once students learn this sequence, they can use phonics rules to recode words from written to oral form. They can then match the sounds associated with written words to words in their vocabulary. And they should be able to transfer these rules from text to text. Students who fail to learn phonics rules do so because they lack the prerequisite knowledge to learn phonics, being phonemic awareness, or because instruction was not systematic and explicit. So what do we mean by systematic and explicit? Systematic and explicit instruction are a sequence progression of lessons that state the rules clearly. For example, the double E rule, which gives the long E sound. It also provides examples, and it allows students to practice applying these rules with materials and activities to support a targeted letter-sound correspondence. There are benefits of this approach, and here are a few. It significantly improves kindergarten and first grade children's word recognition and spelling. It significantly improves children's reading comprehension. It's effective for children from various social and economic backgrounds, and it's beneficial for children who are experiencing difficulties learning to read and who are at risk for developing future reading problems, like children with learning disabilities. However, from a linguistic perspective, there are some problems with phonics instruction. Some say there are too many rules to teach. In a study conducted analyzing over 6,000 words, researchers found that there were 211 letter correspondences, 83 for consonants, and 128 rules for vowels. One example is if a word begins with the letters H and O, a student must look at the end of the word to make a decision about which sounds will correspond with phonics rules learned. Is it hot, house, hook, or horse? It isn't enough for students to sound out each letter in the word. They must look at the whole word to pull out phonics patterns. This also holds true for complex spelling patterns such as city, site, and cycle. Students must know that the I, E, and Y create the S sound and that the vowel remains short unless a second rule applies. Opponents of phonics instruction argue that the popular belief that children can just sound out words is false and not based on any scientific evidence. However, there is evidence that suggests that eye movement is an important piece to the puzzle. Evidence from eye movement research support this claim, and studies have shown that each time the eye stops or fixates on information, say a spelling pattern, it takes a snapshot of that information, which is then sent to the brain for processing. Conversely, when the eye is in constant motion, no information is sent to the brain for processing. Sociopsycholinguists argue that readers can predict what they'll see and fixate just enough to confirm these predictions as they sample text. Whatever your opinion, both schools of thought agree that readers do indeed fixate on information when reading. Many who advocate for phonics instruction acknowledge that though there are generalizations that follow hard rules, there are exceptions to the rule. Let's explore some of those exceptions. Words having double E work 98% of the time. One exception is the word been. Two vowels out walking having the long sound of the first vowel works 45% of the time. Exceptions are red and chief. And what about the short vowel silent E rule? Well, this works 60% of the time. One exception is the word have. So does this mean that reading is conscious or subconscious? And is there validity to sociopsycholinguists' assertion that readers acquire a knowledge of graphophonics as they read? Is phonics instruction really useful? Let's take a look. Phonics is conscious, learned through explicit teaching. Is the primary source in decoding. It's a prerequisite for reading and can be tested independently. While graphophonics is subconscious, one of three sources of information used to construct word meaning. It results through reading text and can be assessed only in the context of meaningful reading. However, there are other things to consider, like the co-articulation of phonemes, which involves nasal assimilation and oral stops. For example, to produce the sound, a speaker must block air with the lips, allowing it to flow through the nose. And to produce the p or b, the speaker blocks air flowing through the nose and through the lips. So, whenever words employ the and p or b sound, speakers consistently produce the sound, even when it doesn't apply, as in lamp. Examples of this are warmth, something, and symphony. In addition to rules governing co-articulation, there are morphophonemic rules that apply to specific morphemes. Morphemes are the smallest unit of meaning in a word. Here, we'll focus on plural morphemes. There are two. They are S and ES. However, there are three pronunciations. S as in cats, Z as in dogs, and Z as in bushes. How do readers know which sound to make? Linguists state that the subconscious becomes conscious through the acquisition of language. Sounds associated with the S are voiceless, and all phonemes associated with the Z are voiced. If the vocal cords are not vibrating at the end of a word, it stands to reason that they don't vibrate for the plural morpheme. One example is the word cars. Similarly, if the vocal cords are vibrating at the end of a word, they continue to vibrate for the plural form, as in shelves. But what about the Z morpheme? Well, linguists assert that if the phonemes preceding Z are S or Z, an I is added for distinction, since simply adding an S does little to distinguish the singular from the plural.